Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Bowman, Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Brain, and I want to welcome you to the second in a three-part series of webinars on the theme of the quest for visibility and resilience. Is the existing supply chain data being underutilized, or do we need more of it? Presented by Tive. Now, in our last episode, we asked you to imagine if visibility of all global shipments becomes a reality, what happens next? Today's episode is entitled The Quest for the Enlightened Supply Chain. Now, one quick note, there will be a question and answer session at the end of this presentation. Audience members are encouraged to submit their questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Now, we hear a lot in the media about the broken supply chain. Today, though, we're going to discuss the common quest for the enlightened supply chain and the opportunities that exist to break down the barriers that are impeding supply chain performance. It's about embracing systems and processes that can support the always on, always connected, nowhere to run and nowhere to hide new world of visibility. With that, I want to introduce our speakers for today. Dr. Yossi Sheffi is the Elisha Gray II Professor of Engineering Systems at MIT, where he serves as director of the Center for Transportation and Logistics. He's an expert in systems optimization, risk analysis, and supply chain management. Dr. Sheffi consults with leading enterprises, has founded or co-founded 5 successful companies, and is the author of 8 books. Krenar Komoni is the founder and CEO of Tive, the global supply chain visibility company. Krenar has developed breakthrough ideas in data analytics, logistics, and electronics design for nearly 20 years. He has led cross-functional teams while enhancing business performance in sales, finance, supply chain logistics, distribution, and manufacturing. And Art Mesher is chancellor at Clean Slate DNA and executive director of Gaines Labs. Previously CEO of Descartes, Art is a recognized supply chain thought leader and author of the industry framework, the 3 V's of supply chain: visibility, variability, and velocity. He is the founder of the Federating Networks model for the supply chain industry and is a pioneer in developing and investing in companies that harness the integration of business communities. Welcome all, Dr. Sheffi, Art, and Krenar. I want to start now with the panel discussion portion of our presentation. I think I want to direct a question to Yossi Sheffi to just kick us off. We hear in the media a lot, Yossi, that the supply chain is broken, quote unquote. Is that indeed the case?
Thank you for the question, because this is a point that makes me mad every time I hear it. Because what does it mean this supply chain is broken? I always have, journalists who used to be sports writer until a week ago, they called me, so talking about, is the supply chain broken? I said, what are you talking this? There's not this supply chain. There are millions of supply chain. Every product has supply chain. Every product has, every assembly plant or every automotive assembly plant has a supplier that's selling sub-assemblies. Each one of these sub-assemblies had their own so-called bill of material and their own supply chain, their own supplier, and their own supplier. So there is, talking about this supply chain shows a fundamental misunderstanding of the world we live in. So anyway, I try to not laugh too hard when people ask me this question, but sometimes it comes through.
And in fact, for all of those multiple supply chains out there, I guess they, despite the pressure, despite the congestion, despite the disruption, these supply chains, the multiple supply chains are indeed working, are they not?
Yeah.
Go
ahead, Yossi. Sorry.
Art, what do you think about that?
No, look, they're not broke. They're just woke. Okay. The industry just all of a sudden, look, I'm 61 years old. I think Yossi might be a day or two younger than me. And we've just woken up and on CNN, I see Yossi on TV. I had to wait 25 years of my career to wake up every day and see supply chains on the news. The whole world's been woke to supply chain. But they're behaving as all of us supply chain scientists would know, they're behaving just like we would expect them to behave. The real problem is now that it's woke, Board of directors walk in and tell CEOs they need to fix the supply chain. And the next thing you know, they go to their management and say, here, you got a $20 million budget, go buy the systems you need to fix the supply chain. And no one has a clue about what they do or why they do it or how they're competitive or why their supply chain makes a difference or where they make money or don't make money or how they're going to compete. There's just a complete lack of awareness. But hey, great news is they're woke up.
Okay, they're not broke.
Go ahead,
Krenar, what do you have to say about
No, I'm completely agree with Art that they are not broke. In fact, I wrote and talk about it all the time. First of all, we have to understand that we did have a once in 1,000 years disaster on our hands. And the example that I always give, think about the food. From one day to the next, in March 2020, restaurants were closed, universities were closed, industrial parks were closed. Half the food goes into these places, and it goes on pallets, not in little boxes with the ingredient on them. Nobody went hungry. I mean, the food kept going, even though the machinery was used to do, 50-kilo sacks on pallets and all this. And by the way, also, people change what they eat. They stop eating, fresh food. They ate a lot of comfort food and cans and stuff like this. And it worked. So people have to catch their breath before they say the supply chain is broke. There are millions of supply chain. Most of them are working under, by the way, incredibly difficult conditions. And it's a testament to the ingenuity and toughness of supply chain managers.
Krenar,
yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say supply chains were working the way they were working. An event happened that's hundreds and hundreds of years, like events like this don't happen, and they operated and they reacted the same way they would have anytime, right? It's not that they were broken. It just they reacted. Supply chains did what any shock system would do, and that's how they reacted. And now, can we do something better in the future? We can discuss that more here, but I don't think they were completely broken.
What's amazing to me, or perhaps disappointing, is really the lack of self-awareness that most companies have on the who, what, why of all of their individual supply chains and what they perform. It really amazes me the lack of understanding of cause and effect. And it's really permeating the industry, the notion of the pop press view of things versus really understanding cost versus service and trade-offs and cause and effect. And what really concerns me is this lack of self-awareness, the lack of a company's real understanding of how it competes and why, how it uses supply chains as a differentiator, how it harnesses its activities, where it competes. Do you even know if you're a good customer? Are you a good supplier? There's just this real fundamental lack of awareness in so many businesses, and they want to make this leap. They're like, oh, we want to do digital transformation because we're woke. Okay, well, if we want to do digital transformation, try standing still and jump on a running treadmill sometime. Just try it. Okay. Because without some fundamental stages of enlightenment, you're going to stand still, you're going to jump on something running real fast, and you're going to fall right on your face. When I ask questions, well, how are you going to compete with your supply chain? You should see the look on people's faces. This Zoom thing's been really funny because, I get the same look from it. Well, how are you going to use your supply chain to compete? And just the duh that comes out of people is amazing. Disappointing though, and we need to fix it.
But wouldn't you agree that the awakening, let's say, happened a little bit more than ever after COVID? Because people, when shock systems, anything, right, in life happens, that's when you start to become, okay, well, I need to be aware of what's going on.
Hey, pressure makes diamonds. Pressure makes diamonds, right? That's why I'm called high pressure mesher, by the way.
But to be fair, guys, there are companies that get it. I mean, Amazon gets it. I mean, there are companies that get that. There are even Walmart, I would say, does a lot of things right. They get the idea that they are in the supply chain business, basically. Because if you think about a retailer, what do? They don't make anything. They just move it, store it, sell it. They're in the supply chain business. And some of them are better than others for sure. But I just want to say that it's a little more nuanced than my friend Art is declaring.
I agree. There are those that get it. It's just amazing to me 20 some years later how many still don't. But
fair enough.
But those that do are winning.
Yes.
I just wonder though, at a time of crisis like this, whether so many supply chains are in basic survival mode. You're saying, look, we're just trying to survive. What do you mean compete? We're just trying to stay alive based on all of the crises that are facing and the disruptions we're facing now. So maybe that's one reason why the whole notion of competing with the supply chain is so alien to them. I wonder. But
by the way, even surviving better than the next guy is competing.
That is,
if you want to, if your competitor goes down and you stay standing, hey, you're doing okay. If you're an industry that's totally disrupted.
Yeah. Well, I think we've long got past the idea where the supply chain is a cost center purely, and it can be something where you can realize competitive advantage. But let me throw a little bit of cold water over you guys and your optimistic, rosy view of supply chains not being broken. The fact is, as you know, there are still silos present after many decades within supply chains, and I put an S on that, but I just want you all to note. Art, what is the deal here? Why are there so many silos still present after so long?
And just maybe before Art jumps in, because I want to preface it just quickly about I read Art's all of the 3 V's on around variability, velocity, and visibility, and also amazing writings. But at the same time, listened to one of his videos back in 2011. I listened it a few months ago, and back in 2011, Art, you were still talking about the federated network model. You were talking about networks, community, applications kind of working together and all that data so we can make supply chains more efficient and better and optimize things. And when I heard you, right, this is 2011, you were giving a speech. I'm like, this makes sense. I think it's going to happen. You would think in 2011 it's going to happen next year, it's going to happen in 6 months. We're still here today in 2022, and we still have those silos. That model that you've talked about, it's still not connected. Why is it like 10 years later, we're almost in the same place where we were?
Well, first of all, Krenar, it's even worse because in 1991, I was in Yossi's classroom talking about these things. So I think we're 30 years into it. I think structurally, I start off with the thought that capitalism and socialism don't coexist real well. And the notion that I think we'll all get along and I think we'll share, which is all really important to supply chains, goes a little bit against the grain of capitalism. If you remember the old collaborative forecasting and replenishment, everyone thought CFAR was going to be so great. It was really just a strategy for Walmart to lock in capacity really early at cheap prices and freeze competitors out. So it was really coercion forecasting versus collaborative. And, you know, as I think Yossi can talk about, there's a lot of gaming that goes on, and I'll leave that for Yossi in a minute. But I think the first issue we have to understand is the systems, processes, and methods that we use were designed not for inter-enterprise, always on, always connected. Our systems aren't network aware. Our systems aren't event driven. The velocity of planning is still in batch. There's just a lot of real structural inherent conditions at the systems level. And then there is the social, economic, political, capital issues involving, you know, who wants to be one up on the next guy and who really wants to share what. And do people really want equality and fairness, or are they looking for the edge? And, you know, I think that this collision of a socialistic, you know, we all need to share and we all need to be transparent, which is really important. That visibility is so important, sometimes collides with the desire around, you know, capitalism and being a channel master, if you will. Yossi, what are your thoughts?
I wouldn't call it capitalism or socialism, even though I understand exactly where I'm coming from.
Right.
It's somewhat inherent in human nature. If you see why companies inside the companies are still siloed, forget the supply chain, because information is power. Because, you know, you want to hoard the information rather than share it, because then you are, as you say, on top. It is something in, and by the way, in praise of capitalism, it brings a lot of new ideas and rewards. That's the problem. So you want the rewards, and if you have the data, maybe you can get something of it and get the rewards associated with it. The question is, what data should be shared? And there are some data that must be shared if you can get it. For example, visibility data. I mean, not sharing visibility data doesn't make any sense, because you need to know what's going on along the supply chain and across the company, and also understanding one version of the truth. Otherwise, companies are, bifurcating. They're just not. There are many examples of people doing the wrong thing against their own interest, against the company, simply by not having the right data. So how do we make sure that we reward people who do more and more innovative, yet let the company operate from one version of the truth? And it's not easy.
Do you see many companies that have a data sharing policy?
Well, Tive, I hope, has a data sharing policy. But
maybe, yeah.
The company.
Not sure about that.
Large company, and I'm working with some very large companies, as you know. The funny thing, at the C-suite level, they do.
Yeah.
They say the words. Only when it filters down, it doesn't.
Right, exactly.
So you talk to there's no CEO that I know, board member, who say data sharing is said, don't do it. It just, everybody say, how can we make it more collaborative? But when it goes down to the people who actually execute, it doesn't happen, because of this innate desire to succeed in a competitive place.
Which can
I mean,
be
I can give a very specific example, maybe, Art, to that question, or to Tive. I mean, there's times where a retailer buys trackers from us quite a bit, and then we have, or a supplier, let's say a use case here, where they're shipping carrots, vegetables, doesn't matter, to a retailer. A retailer says, hey, I received this, can I get the data? And what we have done, because of privacy, because we always ask the actual supplier, say, are you okay to share this data with a retailer? And then 99.9% of the time they say yes, it's okay. But I believe we need to figure out some of these policies and standardization so we can proliferate it throughout the industry. I don't think we're there yet, Art.
Well, but there are so many more examples. Railroads, for example, don't share location data with their suppliers. They go to rail.
They're
afraid of bandits or something, maybe. I don't know.
Well, reminds me of a funny story that I experienced back after 9/11, when we were working with the Department of Homeland Security on cargo security. And we wanted to develop what was called the 24-hour rule. We wanted to know in advance everything that was going to come into the country. And so we're talking to the airlines and we're saying, okay, look, 4 hours before you lift off, you're going to have to give us a manifest, and we're going to have to profile it and approve it. And we need to know everything on your plane. And they said, well, we don't really know what's on the plane. And I go, what do you mean? They go, well, we know the freight forwarder's master bills of lading, but we don't know the individual shipments of origin, because the freight forwarder consolidates them. And the Department of Homeland Security individual said, well, I don't care. We need that data. There's no way without profiling the origin location. If you're going to ship toner cartridges from Yemen to a synagogue in Chicago, we need to know that toner cartridges usually don't come out of Yemen. This is a real scenario, by the way. That was a bomb. The toner cartridges that were sent from Yemen to Chicago was a bomb, and we found it by profiling. So they said, well, Mr. Forwarder, MSAS and others, you need to give us your line item detail. And they said, well, we don't want to give the airlines our line item detail because we don't want them back soliciting our customers. And I'll never forget the Southern gentleman representative. I don't remember what city he was from, but he said in his very Southern accent, gentlemen, I don't really care about your family dysfunction. We need all your data, and we're going to need it or your planes aren't coming in. Do you understand? So, the forwarder doesn't want to tell the airline because they're afraid the airline's going to back solicit. But yet, if I'm going to profile cargo, I need to know everything from everybody. So it actually became a way to make money, because we just got in the middle of it and protected everybody's data and charged everybody for the service, it was like getting 3 dips on the ice cream cone, but that's.
Yeah, but Art, the same problem exists if you are trying for sustainability reason, for social justice reason, just to know where stuff is coming from, to ask the tier 1 supplier to give you who the tier 2 suppliers are, and ask the tier 2 suppliers to give the tier 1 supplier who their tier 3 suppliers are. They don't want to do it. It's a competitive advantage, and they're afraid that people will go around it.
That's right.
So you don't know. So you look at the OEM who doesn't know. You know, when they find out, when I don't know, General Motors find out that they have some supply on in China, when something blows up,
Right.
and then the media find out, hey, GM, you are employing this supplier. They don't even know they do, because this supplier is tier 5 in the supply chain, employed by somebody else, employed by some, and nobody tells them this.
Right.
Okay. All right. It's getting this portrait is getting darker by the moment because of the human nature of life.
It's enlightenment. That's what we're gonna do.
All right. Yeah, we are talking about enlightening. That is the theme of our discussion today. I want to move on though to talk about one of the big V's that Art is so good about highlighting, and that is variability. The fact is that variability is indeed a fact of life, and I'm just wondering, are we doomed to always take hits based on that reality? What do you think, Art?
Well, I'll take a little issue with the framing of the question about taking hits. Okay, so you know, in martial arts, there's a martial art called Aikido, where you take the forces that are being used against you and you apply them for your own benefit. Right. Mm-hmm. And the problem we really have here is we're running from all the things we really need to be embracing. You know, we're not using the forces that are fighting us to our advantage. How many companies wake up every day trying to minimize integration liability? Oh, let's just go get one system from one vendor and then it's all going to be good and I don't have to integrate anything. When competitive advantage comes from maximizing your integration ability, not minimizing your integration, but maximizing your ability, not minimizing your liability. The world-class companies are really, really good at getting data, integrating systems, embracing their community, and taking control of their channel. And yet most people are afraid to do all that. They just want to go pick a vendor and run. So, you know, the first thing we need to do is understand we shouldn't be running from these things. You know, we need to embrace them. Right. And when you talk about unique customer, product, channel, micro supply chains, you know, this variability of new product, new channel, the speed that can be managed is really where competition lies going forward, the speed of that recombination. You need to embrace that variability. We have a big problem that guys were running around saying, well, we should reduce SKUs and, you know, get rid of 3/4 of the SKUs we have in our CPG portfolio, but customers are buying M&Ms with their pictures on it. I mean, we started with a green M&M and that was kind of cool. And then we went to, gee, you can personalize your M&M with pictures. Then you got all these micro brands all over the place, just beating the living heck out of big brands. Why? Because they're embracing variability. They're doing really unique things in local markets that are highly personalized. And if you can embrace that personalization and that local presence and that constant new product introduction, that's where your competitive advantage is going to come from. So it's not like we're going to take hits. It's we're going to learn how to deal with it. And then we're going to harness it. And then, as I say, ride the wave, turn it to your advantage.
And there are examples, I mean, literally age-old example of doing the airlines used to run sometimes half empty and sometimes, you know, couldn't accommodate everybody who came to a flight. So they instituted the dynamic pricing, the so-called yield management, which means that they charge different people different rates, and it changes. It changes with the time. As the classes are filled up, and I'm talking about classes, I mean, within the economy class, they'll have about 10 classes. So as the classes fill up, they change the price, they open it, they actually go up and down. So here is it's just a tool. And by the way, the main sign that it's successful is everybody is doing it, including hotels now and car, you know, rental company. It's American Airlines started it, Sabre, but everybody. That's an example of taking advantage. And by the way, it increased profit. It got a lot of economic good came out of it. So this is an example of looking at the variability and saying we don't know what's going on and doing something with it to actually increase financial result.
You know, it's funny, Yossi, because you and I met back in that I met you back. That's when I first met you, was back in the Sabre days with STG. But Uber really woke everyone on dynamic. I mean, we knew at dynamic pricing, you and I understood yield management for a long time, but Uber took everyone on the planet to school with like everybody learned about dynamic pricing as soon as the rain started to fall and the car price go up, you know? So
Exactly.
like now it's just, so there's a bar in Germany that dynamically prices beer real time throughout the night.
Wow.
And it's very interesting. And Yossi, I don't know if you know, but Mitchell Berman, your friend, is actually building a simulation of that bar to teach dynamic pricing to people.
But
Is it getting cheaper or more expensive at 1 a.m.?
Well, it depends on the patrons and what's going on real
It's
time.
not only this. In Las Vegas, there are a table where the minimum bet is changing all the time, depending on how many people.
Yeah, exactly.
Are coming.
Exactly.
I mean, this is exactly
Supply and demand. Yeah.
Exactly. They're doing basically a real-time SNOP in some sense. You know, quickly adjusting their assets and what's going on, and they send more croupiers, less croupiers. I mean, just adjust in real time, depending.
I'm gonna tie this to supply chain, right? So why can they embrace that variability? Why can they do that? Is because they have visibility. Somehow they know how many people are at the casino. They know how many people are drinking beer.
That's right.
So in order to embrace variability, you have to have visibility. When our customers shipping fruits, vegetables, perishables, and they know the temperature is going to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, it's supposed to be at 32, they know what to do exactly. They're not going to take the hit. They're going to call the carrier, they're going to call a driver, and then they're going to fix it.
Listen, one of the most important shifts is the shift from the knowledge economy to the surveillance economy. Now, this is a whole different discussion for a whole nother day.
Boy, now we're really getting into
but listen, we're all under surveillance. You know, when you go to the web and you start surfing, you know, everyone talks about Amazon, you know, their last mile advantage. No, the advantage is they're surveilling your behavior before you buy anything. And they're able to use all kinds of tools and techniques to shape and drive your demand. But it starts with this notion of surveillance. And this surveillance is quite permeating. And of course, Krenar, what you do is so important, these watchdog services, these surveillance services. But in this new nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, always connected world, you absolutely have to get a hold of this and understand how are you using surveillance. One of the questions I ask all the time is, do you surveil your customer? People think, what are you talking about? Like, okay, well, Amazon knows.
I can give you an example. This happened to me. This is great. I was searching for a Dyson vacuum cleaner because I bought one, and I was trying to buy it on Amazon, but you couldn't because you had to buy it, you know, with buying options, and you got to pay $50 for shipping. And I searched on Google, searched for like a week. A week later, Amazon had it on Prime, only one unit, and I could buy it, free shipping. They probably understood that I was about to buy this for a week, and they put it in their warehouse. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what they do.
But I'm suggesting that if we want people to embrace it, we should not use the word surveillance.
Sure.
This is really a bad connotation. Use the word visibility. You know, the word surveillance.
100%.
People are getting awfully sensitive about that with Amazon buying Roamby too. Now you're going to know what your house looks like and exactly how many rooms you have and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of a scary idea.
iRobot, right? They bought iRobot.
Yeah.
Is that what? Yeah.
Look, we should be scared of what's going on with surveillance. They're actually another subject, but it's pretty damaging what goes on out there. Amazon can put a product on market, and then they can find out that of the 40 SKUs that you're selling, only 3 of them represent 90% of your margin, and then they go knock off those 3. You know, and also
different topic.
You're going, oh my God, this surveillance thing is very, you know, I know it's a nasty word, but it's real.
But isn't that just the first step? I mean, you have the information. If you are surveilling successfully, okay, great, you know all this, but then how do you translate that into a level of agility that allows you to respond at the moment of what that actual demand is?
It's really interesting. Most people will give the answer that it's technology, and it's part of the answer. But to me, a lot of this is culture and mindset, being able to, being conditioned and socialized to react quickly, to move information across the company, to be able to get to decision make or to make decisions. There are companies who are well known, Zara and others, well known for allowing low-level people to make important decisions without without going up the ladder and down the ladder with all the approvals. But this means they trust, their employees, which a lot of companies, you need to move up and down. Nobody lets you make, a production decision, a distribution decision quickly. So part of it is trust, training, culture.
Okay. Well, up to now, it sounds like what we're talking about is even more complex supply chains, complexity in surveillance, complexity in pricing, complexity in production, multiple tiers of production and the like. But I'm wondering if this is leading to a situation where there are just too many middlemen in supply chains today. Krenar, what do you think about that?
But yeah, potentially are. We're not there with data. We're not there with all the things we've been talking about. So there are, my father-in-law's got a trucking business. And the other day I was talking to him and he's like, I had a load that I moved and I went to my broker who had to go to another broker, to pay me. So it was like a load that was almost triple brokered, which is pretty, and everybody made like $200 on top of it, everything. So by the time he got it, it was $600 less than, or $400 maybe less than what it should have been. So there are too many middlemen, and it's because of technology. If you look at just order to cash, I think, Art, we were talking a little bit about this, like a shipment gets delivered, we should be able to know it got delivered. We should be able to pay, the receiver should be able to pay the supplier immediately right there and then. But that doesn't happen. There's invoices, there's emails, there's phone calls. And there was examples of, I think Maersk or many others did it, how many touches go from Africa for flowers all the way to the United States. It was like 40 or 50 different documents and touch points until they got to the final destination. So there are plenty of middlemen, but I'd be curious, maybe Art or Yossi, is there a way to reduce that? What are we missing to reduce the amount of middlemen that are there today?
I think we will have middlemen. Let's
True.
Let's move a few years forward. There will be middlemen, but this will be the most sophisticated, tech-savvy, providing digital solution middlemen, because you need this, because this is an expertise in itself. So whether it's a software company or Google or Microsoft or a startup or whatever, you need people who can look. We have it now in the truckload business. We have several companies, I don't know, successful or not, but several companies who do load boards, digital load boards, Convoy and several others. Uber does it, Convoy does it. Actually, C.H. Robinson now start to do it. The problem is, honestly, at this point, since I visited some of these companies, you look behind door number 3 and there are 2,000 people sitting with telephone and still calling the truck.
Big lie.
To find out.
It's a big lie.
But they get a lot of VC money because of this. But over time, one hopes that these companies, in some sense, for the market to function better, will succeed, and there will be less the number of middlemen who hopefully will go down, because you will have people who can aggregate the information and distribute it to the people who need to have it.
There's a certain efficiency and structural inherent conditional changes that certain middlemen can offer that are very, very valuable. Unfortunately, a lot of middlemen play my margins, your margins, my margin. And, people are making 20% by just, brokering or introducing people versus really making structurally inherent conditional changes. If a network could route continuous move trucks 5 days a week and lower the cost over weekly period for the asset versus one load at a time, if some guy says, well, every time you take one load, I'll turn it into 5, it changes something. Sabre, Yossi, something you were very involved in, changed the whole industry. Okay. So where there's a very important role is where what I call a de facto standardizer, somebody who will get in the middle of a community and become the standardizer of data and policy. It's not just data, it's really policy, and getting everyone to share and get along. It's not so easy, but these federators, as I call them, are really critical middlemen. And Krenar, I'd argue you're an example of that. You know, you're going to provide a system of hardware, software, network, watchdog services, things to help your customers, you know, ensure they know their condition and things. And, you know, you serve in itself as an example of someone who's in the middle, who's connecting a bunch of parties together, hardware, software, network, people, and assets, and bring them all together. I look at things and go ahead.
Yeah.
Of course, the cards was a classic example of this.
Yeah, sure. You know, I look at it like this. I call it resources in motion management, which is there's 4 primary resources that are in motion. You have people, you've got the conveyance unit, you've got the asset or inventory, and then you have documents or money or data, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same thing to me. And you got these resources that are all in motion. Right. And the reality is there's different systems to manage people, different systems to manage conveyance units, different systems to manage inventory. And God knows how messed up the money and the data thing is. And when you can stick somebody in the middle in a very specialized environment, hyper specialized vertical sub-community of common interest, you know, and get everybody together and get the people, the conveyance unit, the inventory, and the data, documents, money, all aggregated in a common work. Because that's how business is done. Business is done, you know, the person, they get in the truck, they deliver the asset, and you sign the document. Okay. But our systems aren't built anything like that. So if somebody can come into the middle and bring all that together in a way that really makes things more efficient and effective. And this is the important words, efficient and effective. It's productivity at its core.
I hate to cut this off. It's been a great discussion so far, but I really do want to move into audience Q&A because we do have some audience questions. So let's do that now. And even as we are doing this, audience members, you are encouraged to continue to submit your questions by clicking on that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. And we will get to as many of them as we can, time permitting. So let's start out with this one. And it kind of goes back to our discussion at the early part of our conversation. And this questioner is saying, what steps can companies take now to start understanding how they might make their supply chains a competitive core competency? So once again, you know, supply chain is competitive. Who wants to jump on that one? Sounds like maybe.
Look, I'll jump on this because I have a pretty standard, you know, view of this, which is it starts with self-awareness, and this enlightenment path to enlightenment starts with self-awareness. And I break it into 3 simple categories. There's going to be nothing really that amazing here. The first is you have to know thyself. Are you a good customer? Are you a good supplier? Do you understand what you do and why you do it and your purposes? And then do you know your network? The second thing is once you know your own awareness, then you got to understand your network. And once you understand your network, the final thing for me is you got to know your why. And the why for me isn't like, why do I exist? It's what is cause and effect? What are the conditions? What is it that I'm doing? And what are the impacts of what I'm doing? You know, am I competing on cost? Am I competing on service? Am I competing on product? You know, what are my strategies and knowing the why? But you got to first know who you are. Is your data any good? Are you a good customer? Are you a good supplier? You know, this self-awareness really is the starting spot. Yossi, I'm sure you've got.
I don't know. I agree. I mean, it is in many ways hard to do. I'm reminded.
That's I was gonna say that. Yeah.
I'm reminded of who was the CEO came from Boeing and took over Ford, and Alan Mulally. And there's this stories about him that he used to have meetings of all the department heads. And they each present report, and they had dashboard of green, yellow, red. And he said, all your presentations are green, every one of them. And then we lose a hell of a lot of money. The company is totally in the red. but every one of you is absolutely in the green. That to me was such a case that actually happened. It's in the Detroit press was and so to me it's a classic thing. The lack of self-awareness,
Right.
it's lack of self-awareness, lack of ability to admit that we are not as hot as we try to present, because this should be the first step to fix what we are doing. But we have to admit that there's something to fix. And again, we go to what we covered before, the fact that information is power. We don't share. We don't, we live in silo. So we come back to the same discussion.
Okay.
You
And
can't manage in denial.
To do that, I
Exactly.
guess, Art, would you like, would a good first step would be just to ask, because you're serving at the end customers, no matter who you're shipping something to customers, would it be a good way to maybe just ask all your customers, how do you think I'm doing? Like, how do you think we're doing as a company? Yeah,
Sure.
that
Look,
I think would.
I had a guy call me up and say, "Hey, Art, I got a real problem here. Can you help me pick a TMS?" And I said, "Well, what's your, what do you need what do you need a TMS for?" And he said, "God, I just, I can't get carriers to haul my freight, and my prices are just going through the moon." And I said, "Well, what do you do?" And he said, "Well, I make patio sets, and I have 6-foot pieces of lumber, and we floor load our trailers, and we ship to retail places." And I said, "So do you use no, it's all floor loaded. It has to be hand loaded and hand unloaded." I said, "What do you do for appointments?" He said, "Oh, we don't really have appointments. The carriers just line up every day and they come in first come, first serve." And I said, "You don't need a TMS. You need to redesign how you build your product so that you only have lumber that's 4 feet long, so you can have a knockdown product like IKEA does, so you can palletize it, so you can have carriers that want to haul your freight. You don't need a TMS. You need to change the design of what you're doing." But again, cause and effect. I mean, they just, what they were building and how they were building it, you weren't going to stand in line all day to get a floor loaded truck that then you have to unload yourself when you get somewhere else. I mean, carriers hated him. It had nothing to do with anything other than his design of what he was building was completely messed up. Didn't understand cause and effect.
Yeah.
Didn't need a TMS, needed to make sure he could build palletized knockdown furniture.
In that case, he could ask, let's say his carriers are internal customers. He could ask carriers, why aren't you guys coming?
Exactly. Exactly.
Because, yeah, you have to unload this thing.
All right. Early on, we were talking about how digitization is not just a slam dunk, obvious answer to everyone's problems. However, this questioner is asking how digital transformation might help to optimize the shipping industry supply chain. Maybe Krenar, you could start off on that one.
It's pretty straightforward. I think awareness that's one way I would say you ask customers and just understand what's happening and how your business is doing. But another way to get awareness and how you can transform yourself is just by understanding how the flow of all your goods and inventory is going in your system, in your network, in your supply chain. And one way to do that is by putting what we developed, like trackers. There's many other ways, by like Art said, the integration, not trying to reduce the amount of integrations, but do as many integrations with all the people that you have so you can understand the data on what's available and what's not. And then when you look at that data, try and understand how you can transform it, where you can make decisions. But you have to start understanding what data is available and what's not right now. So I would say that would be the first step.
Yeah. Art,
What do you?
Everybody throws around the word digitization these days, Art. I mean, what does it mean to you, and how can it actually be brought to a point where it's of real impact and effect?
Before Art even answer, honestly, it's another thing that is a pet peeve of mine. What's the process? What are you trying to do?
Yeah, exactly.
I always reminded of going to board meeting, and people would ask the CEO, "What's your China policy?" Now they ask, "What's your, blockchain policy?"
Mm-hmm.
This is ridiculous. I mean, what's the problem that you're trying to solve? Then tell me, if there's technology, if there's process, if there's people, what it is that you're trying to solve. You must start from this. Anyway, Art, I stole your answer. So.
No. Look, we all remember when it's funny. The fad du jours are the same. They just changed names. So remember when we were talking about re-engineering?
Of course.
I think that was circa 2000 or something. These supply chains weren't engineered in the first place. So what are we talking about? What are we re-engineering? We never engineered them the first time. And the problem I have with digital transformation is it's big and it's long. It's a big, long word. And I'm a big believer in incrementalism. And the problem is digital transformation has been turned into this 3-year, 5-year, 10, $20 million CapEx of technology, small, incremental, baby steps functions. That's really this notion that we're going to transform ourselves, you know, like I'm going to take a robot and turn it into a car, like some kind of transformer movie. It's just wrong. What we just need is incremental improvement to productivity, efficiency, and effectiveness. And Big Bang generally loses. Every once in a while, someone gets Big Bang right. But for everyone that gets it right, there's 99 guys that get caught in the quicksand. Start simple. Pick a trade lane, pick a product, pick a customer, pick a channel, figure it out, understand your data, right? You know, I called a vendor a liar the other day, and I said, you guys are lying to everybody, saying how easy it all is, and you're doing this transformation. And the guy said, Art, I'm only as honest as my customers' data, you know.
Good point.
Kind of set me back. I needed to understand. Maybe he just wasn't lying. He just wasn't telling the truth.
Yes. He's just telling the customer what the customer
wants to hear.
Of course.
Yeah. But there are, I guess to that point, I 100%, you can't, like, even when I started this company, I didn't, like, you can't start with 300 customers. You start with one, try to see what the issues are and challenges, and you go from there. It's like a startup, even a digital transformation, quote unquote. But there are tools out there. It's not like we're out of tools or out of processes and people and technology to be able to understand and digitize portions of the business.
Krenar, your solution is exactly what Art is talking about. You took at a specific issue. You know, I need to know where the shipment is so I can react to this, and I can optimize, and I can do stuff. So, okay, that's a very narrow. I don't go and put robots everywhere, and I don't go and you know,
cash payments, finance, AI, ML.
Of course, and I said a specific. So I have a specific problem, and this is a specific solution. It's one solution. But, you know, but the main thing is it starts from the problem. You know, I need to know where stuff is so I can react, so I can find out early where it is. I can find out early if there's a problem and do something about it.
You know, what's interesting is with this woken environment where we have this digital transformation being broadcasted everywhere, if you close your eyes and you listen, everybody's really saying the same thing. They all want, you know, end-to-end transparency. They want to sense and respond to events. They want to use intelligent systems to react with speed. Yeah. They want to learn from these events, and they want to intelligently plan for the future. They all want the same thing. And to do that, you kind of need 3 things. I had a triangle I've used for 30 years now, which is you have to have source data. You got to connect it to real-time command and control. And then you got to link the feedback loop to intelligent decision support. 3 things: source data collection, real-time command and control, and intelligent decision support. That's fundamentally what everybody's thinking they want. This notion of transformation. Everybody really kind of says the same thing, but getting there, that's a whole different story. Again, just understanding your data. I mean, I had a customer who said to me they had one ERP system, and, you know, their data was great. They had 26 different address files for the exact same customer location across 120 plants. So, you know.
But it was digital.
It was digital. You just got to figure out which address was right.
Right. Okay. All right. Now let's move on to another question here. When supply chain disruptions happen, should demand be shaped as per supply, or should supply be shaped according to the demand?
What I love allocation, man.
Yeah.
Who wants to do the
not
chicken and egg
me
question?
on this one?
Go ahead, Yossi. Start off.
Look, the thing is, you can shape demand, for example, through pricing. I mean, of course, you can shape demand. The trick is to be able to. Let me go back. You know, in June 16, Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, said, and I'm misquoting him, but that's what he said. He said, I always knew that it's easy to increase demand just with money. I never knew that supply is a problem. And I'm holding my head and I say, this is ridiculous. Yeah, of course you can shower everybody with money, but supply is physics. There are only so much capacity and so many trucks and so many, there's just physics. So it is in many cases impossible to adjust demand, to adjust supply in the short term for any demand that's out there. It's just not realistic because supply is physics. I mean, you can do somewhat, but then you start playing with other factors, as I said, like pricing, like people who don't want to play with pricing think it's unfair. They do allocation, and you can various ways of doing allocation. The Japanese are known for doing fair allocation. There are companies who do allocation based on the margins that they get from customers. But it can be done, of course. I'm just saying that completely adjusting supply in short term, in many cases, is impossible.
Okay.
Yeah, look, I think there's also something else to understand on the supply side of this, which, is, the expression karma's a, okay. So there's a lot of companies out there that aren't really that great of a customer. And I know a real story, copper pricing went a little bit crazy. And we actually, for one of my clients, we decided to hoard copper. So we went really early into the copper cycle and bought as much of it as we could. And then when people called up and said, I need copper, it's like, well, your payment terms suck. You don't really buy that much from me. And I'm only selling copper if you have a minimum order of this and you pay within this period. And by the way, you know what? We're only going to sell copper to our best customers. Right. So sometimes when things go on allocation, if you're not a really good corporate citizen, you're going to be on the bad end of that stick.
That's true.
And I found this last period of 2 years with scarcity on supply has taught some very bad citizens a very important lesson.
Yeah, even the chip shortage that just happened, right? They had hundreds of customers, and the ones that
why would I sell
didn't
it
pay
to
on time on net 30, or they didn't pay on net whatever the terms were.
Why should I
they were on the bottom of the list?
Why should I sell it to you when someone else will be a lot better? And there's only so much of it. So I'm going to maximize my opportunity.
That's just one of the allocation mechanisms.
Sure, it's an example.
You allocate it to certain customers and not others. You put minimum. And by the way, the problem in this, the question is how you do it. When we had the Thailand floods, there are two companies there. One of them was Western Digital, was completely flooded, and a competitor did exactly this. They say, anybody who wants this drive and stuff like this, 3-year contract.
Right.
Otherwise you don't get it. Or the problem is, the question is how you do it, because it backfired.
Sure.
You got so much bad publicity, and all the customers went back to Western Digital afterwards. So the question is how you do it.
That's right. That's right.
Listen, guys, regretfully, we are almost out of time. We have time for just one final question, and I'm going to ask, I think, put Art on stage for this one. Listening to you guys over the last hour, I've kept hearing about the 3 V's: variability, visibility, velocity. Art, tell us how to tie all this together. I mean, given that variability is a fact of life, as we discussed, what should companies be doing?
Well, first, we need to harness this visibility, right? We need to take this new world survey, always on, always connected, real-time visible information, and use it to help us start to understand today and also the future and see around corners. So we have to really harness that visibility, but we have to embrace variability. We really have to understand that the competitive advantages come from micro supply chain, unique customer, product, channel configurations, but the competitive advantage comes from the velocity to which you can recombinate those unique customer, product, channel, the speed to market, the speed to recombination, the speed to resupply. Everyone talks about resilience. They had one supplier. If you got 6, you're a little more resilient, and your ability to go recombinate within those 6 is a lot more resilient than just having one. So the velocity and speed which you can create products, create channels, create unique customer product channel configurations, unique network configurations, and then compete with that recombinant velocity. That's where real competitive advantage comes from. So you got to embrace visibility, harness variability, and compete on velocity.
Okay, fantastic. This has been such a great discussion of the last hour. It's been very frank and open and remarkably free of buzzwords. I really appreciate all 3 of you having engaged in that. But we are going to have to sign off now. And I'm sorry, any audience questions that did not get answered, I'm sure that our panelists would be only too happy to address them offline. But in the meantime, I want you to remember, join us on Wednesday, August 25th at 11 a.m. Eastern for the 3rd in this 3-part series. The quest for visibility and resilience. Is the existing supply chain data being underutilized, or do we need more of it? The topic next time will be, can end-to-end enterprises succeed this time around, controlling the chain without breaking the bank? You'll get more information in a follow-up email along with a URL to register. Dr. Yossi Sheffi, Krenar Komoni, and Art Mesher, thanks once again for a fantastic presentation. Thank you, audience members, for joining in and asking your excellent questions. We'll see you next time. Everybody, in the meantime, have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Art.